I'd like to call the ceremony to order and ask you all to please rise and to remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our chaplain today, the Reverend Stephanie Shute Kelch. Stephanie is the minister of Second Parish Church here in Hingham. Stephanie.
In the name of all we hold holy, our source of creation and meaning, the images of so many faiths and principles, let us unite in this time together for celebration of a piece of our town's history. May today's reenactment bring our past to our present. May we find the courage and the wisdom to listen to how the actions and choices of centuries past still speak to the actions and the choices we face today. Let us enjoy the staging and the history, yes, but so too, let us reflect on the meaning behind this battle of Grape Island and what it can teach us about our motives, our own efforts, our own responsibilities. As we do so, may we feel the deepest respect for those whose mindful participation helps to make history, and for those whose commitment to the long arc of past, present, and future guides us today in learning from our history. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning. Have you, a Hingham resident, ever wondered why Hingham celebrates the Battle of Grape Island annually? Studying at the Hingham Historical Society as a high school intern, I was fascinated when I came across information about a small battle of the Revolutionary War in one of Hingham's favorite and most detailed recorded histories by a book of the title, Not All Is Changed. With this work at my fingertips, as well as sources from the archives, I was able to find out a plethora of information surrounding this phenomenon. Events around the same few months in which the battle occurred, as well as figuring out basic information about some historical Hinghamites involved, such as their role in Hingham's history and their role on Grape Island. Interested in some of the revolutionary military history of the years surrounding 1775, I first found that in 1773, post-Boston Massacre, at least 4 Hinghamites took part in the Boston Tea Party, dressed as Indians, and those including Jared Joy, Samuel Sprigg, Amos Lincoln, and Abraham Tower. Being able to travel by ferry through the harbor to Boston's South End is fascinating, considering men from our very own town participated in this famed event, whose setting can still be easily accessed today. The Battle of Grape Island, however, occurred post-Lexington and Concord in the spring of 1775. On February 15th, 1775, a committee was appointed to, quote, oversee the state of the militia. Hingham Historical Society extraordinaire John Richardson provided me with this information through his collections of transcribed revolutionary documents, including information that stated that military officers of several companies of the Hingham Militia were told to train and equip men with guns and ammunition, also stating that each militia got 12 shillings per week, with 4 pence to every man at every roll call. This all occurred 2 months before the engagement at Grape Island. The Battle of Lexington and Concord, in which 7 Hingham men participated, occurred, as most famously suggested in the Longfellow poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, on the 19th of April in 1775. I discovered that after this battle, the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts created an army of 13,000, which met in Watertown, and secured soldiers by providing each member with a coat and requiring 8 months of service, which over 12 Hingham men served. It is clear in both of these preparational messages that towns in Massachusetts, especially near Boston, the local governments and citizens were preparing for an imminent war with the British. About 1 month after Lexington and Concord, on May 2nd, 1775, a total of 154 men split up into 4 companies came out from the South Shore towns, including Weymouth, Scituate, Braintree, and of course Hingham, under local officers. The Hingham Battalion is known to have gathered at the Crow Point area, right near Grape Island, right over to your left. The battle occurred because of tensions between colonials and British troops. Although many South Shore towns had supported many of the Patriots, there still remained in New England, and even in the radical Boston area, those old families who were still loyal to the crown. These loyalists, some very respected, were not all that uncommon in colonial towns. One such family was the Leavitt family, which I found a significant amount of information on while skimming Not All Is Changed, as well as information about the Leavitt patriarch of the time, Elisha Leavitt, a man who owned Grape Island at the time of the battle. Using Not All Is Changed, I discovered that Elisha Leavitt, commonly known as Old Punk, and great-grandson of John Leavitt, an original settler in Hingham, was a British sympathizer and the primary indirect cause of the Battle of Grape Island. Elisha Leavitt had permitted British soldiers to use Grape Islands as means of goods. He kept cattle and hay on the island and offered it up to British soldiers as supplies. On the day of the Battle of Grape Island, British soldiers traveled to the island, and South Shore militias fired at them from shore because of the high tide. When crossing the harbor was feasible, the militias drove the British away from the island, and some believe they burned the hay on the island and took the cattle that was there, as the redcoats escaped. Interestingly enough, John Richardson's collection also had transcribed documents from May 24, 1775, concerning Hingham's desire to create a committee to wait on the Committee of War, as well as a desire to create a committee of correspondence as a communication network between Hingham's group and the surrounding towns' correspondence committees. This documentation only occurred a month or so following the Battle of Grape Island. This correspondence would have been necessary in organizing and arranging troops on the South Shore to ensure safety in the future. Few battles were fought near these towns in the South Shore, but those in Hingham can always be proud of living up to the phrase, better safe than sorry. Looking through Not All Is Changed, as well as a copy of the compilation of the Leavitt family papers, I also found out interesting information on Elisha Leavitt, the Tory who owned Grape Island. After the battle, it is commonly known that some tense and riled-up colonials went to Leavitt's house and threatened him, he being a loyalist. While reading up on the story in a history of the battle that advertised this annual reenactment, I came across facts that claimed that Leavitt appeased the angry mob with alcohol and cracker snacks so as to convince them to leave him alone. It's pretty crazy. Still a fascinating story, the tale of Grape Island lives on to this day, and we are so lucky to be able to remember those who served so long ago. Thank you.
Resurrected from history, the Hingham Militia reorganized in 1975 from its founding in 1635. The present unit was formed to participate in America's bicentennial celebrations. In particular, it commemorates the War for Independence when the Hingham Militia was under the command of then General, Colonel Benjamin Lincoln, from 1772 through the early days of the Revolution. The Hingham Militia appears today to reenact events that occurred 244 years ago. The Grape Island Battle carried great importance, as it was the first armed confrontation between the belligerents since the battle at Lexington and Concord a mere 4 weeks before. It tested the Patriots' conviction and their willingness to engage. The Hingham unit is attired and armed as it would have been then. Many officers still had their uniforms from the earlier French and Indian conflicts, while the privates would have worn whatever they had. The 1st Regiment of Foot Guards, the regiment was first raised in 1656 by King Charles I, and the regiment fought in almost every major campaign that involved the British Army since the 1660s. During the American Revolution, the regiment was a significant force. The regiment occupied New York after the Battle of Long Island in 1776. And in 1777, the regiment fought in Pennsylvania and played an important part in the British victory at Brandywine. In 1779, the regiment was sent south. Although distinguished in battle, the Guards were part of the army that was trapped and forced to surrender at Yorktown in September 1781. As a result of particular bravery shown at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the regiment became known as the 1st Regiment or Grenadier Regiment of Foot Guards, becoming the only regiment in the British Army to have earned its title as a result of the part it had played in action. This very day, you're likely to see the Grenadier Guards in London on guard duty at Buckingham Palace, or taking part in that most amazing display of precision drill, the Trooping of the Colors. And now for the reenactment. It's been a single month since Lexington and Concord, and the British are bottled up in Boston, cut off and surrounded on three sides by a fledgling Continental Army and militia. Now, the ocean is the British lifeline, and its powerful navy controls the seas, keeping residents of Boston harbor communities along the coast watching with a wary eye for sails on the horizon, coming out of Boston to plunder their towns. The garrison in Boston was not starving. They were supplied by the British Navy with barrels of salt pork and beef, but the Army's horses needed more hay than could be grown within the confines of Boston, and fresh meat for the troops would also be welcome. British General Gage had procured hay and livestock from Hingham resident and Loyalist Elisha Leavitt, a prosperous farmer and the owner of Grape Island. About 50 acres in size and located at the mouth of the Back River near Hewitt's Cove, Grape Island was being used by Leavitt to grow hay and to graze his livestock. Now, with fodder for his horses scarce, General Gage remembered Leavitt's island and that Leavitt could get it all from the sea that he controlled. Gage, rather, could get it from the sea that he controlled. This takes us to Sunday morning, May 21st, 1775. On that morning, General Gage dispatched 3 sloops, an armed schooner, and about 30 men under the command of Lieutenant Thomas Innes to procure the hay and the livestock from Elisha Leavitt's island. When the small fleet dropped anchor in the Four River Channel above Grape Island, in the shadow of Weymouth's Great Hill, the locals were not thinking about hay nor livestock. They were thinking about an impending invasion. The British enter from the beach, post guards, and get to work gathering the hay. While the British got busy harvesting the hay, women and children fled inland. A messenger was dispatched to the Continental Army headquarters in Roxbury, and the alarm went out to local militias. Alarm guns spread the word. A succession of shots would establish a chain of sound to the next group. A cannon would fire on the town common. Church bells would ring, and the drummers would sound the roll. This prearranged system was a simple one and efficient, and militias responded and lined the shores from Germantown, Braintree, Weymouth, and Hingham. Over 2,000 members of the militia responded. The alarm flew like lightning, Abigail Adams wrote to her husband John Adams in Philadelphia. John Adams's 2 brothers were among those who responded from the militia. The militia gathered on the far side of the field here. They took a few pot shots at the British, but couldn't do much, at least not yet. An advance guard of Continentals arrived, and though their orders were to observe and simply prevent a possible British landing, they and the militia began to fire at the ships and the British on the island, although their shots fell short. The British and the colonials are separated due to a low tide and grounded barges. As the tide came in, the British continued to harvest and load the sloops with Elisha Leavitt's hay. Then the tide came in and the barges out, landing on one end of the island, while 30 or so of the British troops began to run out of time on the other end of the island. Meanwhile, the militia started assembling and moving toward the British. That caused the British to stop harvesting and to set up their defensive position and begin to get ready to retire in order. Now, with their feet dry on Grape Island, the militia pursue and drive the British off, depriving them of Leavitt's hay and his livestock. Outnumbered and out of time, the British headed for their boats and fire a ragged line of defense. They beat a hasty retreat to the ships with only 2 or 3 tons of hay on board, being forced to leave tons of hay on the beach and about 80 tons of hay still growing on Grape Island. Now, the militia and the British began to exchange fire. The militia formed and moved slowly. That gave the British time to return their fire. The British fire retreat, exchange fire. They fire and exchange fire multiple times. The British then leave the field and sail away. Sustaining 3 wounded, the British sailed back to Boston along the Braintree shore, which is now Quincy, exchanging fire with militiamen gathered on the beaches. Now the militia, in possession of Grape Island, burned the hay on the beach. The hay still growing in the field, and for good measure, they burned Elisha Leavitt's barn. Then they took the livestock off the island to ensure there would be no return visits from the British. The militia cried out, "Congratulations, men! Let's pay a visit to the traitor in our midst." Meanwhile, the militia returned back the way they came, safely back on the beach. With any potential invasion thwarted, the Hingham Militia contemplated that traitor in their midst, and they determined to pay a call to Elisha Leavitt and his wife Ruth at their home on North Street, right where St. Paul's Church is located today. The Hingham Militia approached the house. They ranted loudly and carried buckets of tar and feathers, as well as torches, and they pounded on the front door, causing Mrs. Leavitt to respond,
Gentlemen, what is all this racket?
The militia responded, "Madam, we demand the presence of your husband, the Tory Elijah Leavitt."
Gentlemen, we had just returned from church. Let me go see if my husband is ready to receive any visitors.
The militiaman called out, "Madam, if he does not comply, we shall enter this house and receive him right out his front door."
Oh, calm yourselves, gentlemen. I shall go fetch my husband.
Mrs. Leavitt, we demand the presence of your husband, and we demand it now.
Certainly, gentlemen.
Thank you. Gentlemen,
Here, use this
Hingham
one.
Militia.
Use this one.
Cast about your firelocks, prime and load.
The militia called out to Leavitt, "You have arranged to provide the royal forces of Boston with provisions from your island. These actions defy the publicly approved measures of no commerce between patriots and Tories. The agreed upon punishment for such behavior is tarring and feathering. You, Leavitt, are being held in contempt for your actions, and the activities which just resulted in the confrontation between the militia troops and the royal forces on Grape Island." Now Leavitt attempts to halt the uproar by addressing the militia. He hesitates, but says he's a businessman and is simply attempting to do business with those who have access to funds in a difficult time.
gentlemen, welcome to my house. What is the cause of this demand? Gentlemen, I was born and raised in Hingham, as many of you are, and my forefathers were here before them for many, many generations. I have supported the church, the meeting house, and the schools with all of my monies. I am a loyal citizen and a good neighbor to all of you. Well, I can see that you are weary and a little bit agitated. Well, I would like to provide you with a little refreshment. I have a keg of the finest rums that I have imported from the Caribbean, and maybe you would like to join me in wetting your whistles. Gentlemen, it is good to see you over this convivial glass. I pledge and promise to join you in your sentiments and to change my ways. In the meantime, gentlemen, pray drink up the rum I have provided.
And now we see again the reenactment as the battle commences.
Hingham Militia, to the front. Who? Coming in. Ho!
They're gonna shoot a couple times first, and then we shoot back.
To the front. Even line. Dress right and left, man. Dress right. Gentlemen, we must prevent these regular troops from foraging from this island. We will let them know of their presence. We will let them know. Fire low, make sure you strike your targets. Make ready. Take aim. Fire!
Hey, what's going on here?
Prime and load. Prime and
A
load.
shooting game? Go back to your farms and feed your chickens.
I recommend you gather your scoundrels and return to Boston at once. Fire!
Whoa, they won't go away. Let's
Prime
see
and
them.
load. Prime and
Let's get some
load.
good ones.
We need to force them, men. To the front. March.
Fire back at them, lads.
Forward, men. Forward. Let them know of our demands.
We gotta do a few more.
County. Halt. This is your last chance, Lieutenant. We shall dispose of you if you do not leave this property at once. What, men? They're responding. They're responding.
Take that, farmer.
Make ready. Make ready. Take aim. Fire. Forward, men. Prime and load.
The tide's coming in, the tide's coming
Fire
in.
and
Fire and
load.
retire, fire and retire.
Men, we're here to force them off the island. Back to Boston with you, you bloody lobster backs. Back to Boston. Get ready. Take aim. Fire. Disperse these men. Prime and load. Gentlemen, you will move forward. You will pick a target and fire at will. Force these scoundrels off the island. Move ahead, forward, militia.
Back to the boats, back to the boats.
Fire at will. Fire at will. Force them off the
To the
island.
boats.
Back to Boston. Take this message back to your general.
Another one.
Take this message back to your tyrannical king. You shall not return to these parts again to garner provisions. You will be met with a bloody recourse that you shall not forget. Begone with you! Begone with you! Hingham Militia! Gather about. Gather about, men. Gather about me. casual. Gentlemen, you have performed your duty in a marvelous manner today. Your duty was to protect your town, protect your homes, protect your families, and protect our right under the Patriot cause. 3 huzzahs to victory. Hip hip!
Hooray!
Hip hip!
Huzzah!
Well done. Now, one more little situation we need to address. Before we return to our barges and get to the mainland, there is amongst us living a scoundrel Tory. His name is Elijah Leavitt, and he resides on North Street in our own midst. Should we allow this man who has provided these lands and provisions to the Royal General Cage to exist amongst us within our community unpunished? What do you say? We need to proceed to his home. If necessary, we will torch that home, and we will tar and feather that man, as they have been doing in Boston to the loyal Tories living there. We cannot allow this to continue in existing in our community. Therefore, men, we shall return to our boats, return to the mainland, and march on to the Leavitt House and bring with us our wrath to be dispensed upon the person of Elijah Leavitt. Return to your boats, men. Move ahead. Go ahead. Return, men. Go, go, go.
Safely back on the beach, with any potential invasion thwarted, the Hingham Militia approaches the Leavitt house. They arrive ranting loudly and carrying buckets of tar and feathers, as well as their torches. They pound on the front door.
Demand the presence of your husband, Elijah Leavitt. He being the Tory he is, he must come to the forefront. At this time, we demand it.
Gentlemen, we have just returned back from church. Let me go see if my husband is ready to receive guests.
Well, as you do so, madam, I'd suggest you inform them that if he is not willing to receive guests, we shall enter this abode and receive him right out his front door.
Gentlemen, I shall go and retrieve my husband.
Please do. What do you think, man? Does this man deserve punishment? Yes. Yeah. Well, move forward with it. Gentlemen,
Well, good day to you, gentlemen.
We'll see about that.
You are not a gentleman, sir. Pray, hold your tongue while I speak.
well,
Now,
you have arrived, sir, a bit tardy, I might note.
it is
it's-
the Sabbath day, sir.
It is, sir. However, brought upon us on the Sabbath by your actions on your property, sir, occurred a great tumult this morning – 'at our expense. You live amongst us, We have agreed amongst your neighbors and your townspeople that we shall not do commerce with the royals in Boston, nor with your tyrannical king. It is therefore necessary that via your actions you've brought upon yourself, sir, some hearty discipline, the discipline which your fellow Tory friends have fallen under within the realm of Boston. They have been tarred and feathered. They have seen their businesses and their residences destroyed. We intend, sir, to commence with that same activity upon your home and your person. How do you care to respond to such accusations, sir?
To this unlawful assembly, sir? Of course I say fie, but I see you are fellow citizens, as I am. I was born and bred here, the same as most of you, and my ancestors way back as well. I have paid my way. I'm a loyal citizen who's paid for the church, has paid for the school, and for the upkeep of this town. I'm a loyal citizen, I hope you all are. But I can see that you are a little fazed by what has been going on here. Maybe you are tired, and I would deem that you need a little refreshment. My wife, my good wife Ruth, and I will provide you with some refreshments, gentlemen, and I will broach a keg of the finest Caribbean rum for your use, sir, and with which you may indeed wet your whistles. Huzzah!
Well, sir, I don't know how we can turn that provision down. In that it's been a long day. Again, sir, brought on by your activity. He is a Tory. He's a bad.
And sir, you are the rebels, but I understand the lay of the land here, and I pledge to change my ways and to agree with all of you, to agree with the majority.
You do, sir?
May we raise a glass together, gentlemen?
Well, yes, we may, sir. Just, that's only out of thirst. I want you to know. A bit of quenching may be needed by these wearisome.
We will raise a glass together. The toast yet to be determined, sir.
Well, we shall find upon sampling your product as to how friendly the toast may be, sir.
Indeed. Well, let us do join me, gentlemen, in, if not a toast, then a convivial glass. Pray, join me.
We shall.
After receiving sweets from Mrs. Leavitt and several rounds of rum,
Go ahead.
the mood of the militia began to change from hostility to merriment during their discourse. After considerable, eventually pleasant interactions,
Huzzah for the Levitts!
the militia retired for the day. Not only huzzah for the Levitts, let's hear a huzzah for the reenactors, both patriots and British.